Hi everyone, good morning, welcome back from morning tea. If you could find your way to your seats, if you could perhaps finish up conversations, that would be awesome. Thanks everyone. If you just make your way back to your seats, we're going to head on with the next section of our All Staff Day. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Andrew Yule. Just like Jen Higgins, I am a person. I'm also the Director of Advocacy and Strategic Communications here at Jesuit Social Services. And we're going to have a bit of a session now in recognition of World Refugee Day. It's also, besides being World Refugee Day, which is a really important day to us here at Jesuit Social Services, many of our participants and also many of our staff have had some experience of being a refugee, seeking asylum or migrating to Australia. It's also the middle of the Refugee Council of Australia's Refugee Week, which Jesuit Social Services has been a partner of for many years now. So World Refugee Day is an international day designated by the UN to honour refugees and to celebrate the strengths and courage of people who have been forced to flee their homes. Refugee Week is an annual activity to promote greater awareness of refugees and the issues they face and the contributions that refugees make to our communities and our entire country. It's an important reminder that seeking asylum is not illegal, even though a lot of the rhetoric around that would have us believe it. So it's also not illegal no matter how you come to Australia, even if that is by boat. And Australia does have international responsibilities under refugee rights. People are forced to flee persecution due to their culture, ethnicity, nationality, religious beliefs, non-religious beliefs, gender, sexual orientation and gender identity, and also political views and activism. We have a duty here in Australia and as people to welcome people to our communities and support them as they resettle. Being World Refugee Day, it's a great opportunity to talk about how Jesuit Social Services works in a number of different ways with refugees through some of our programs, and also the advocacy that we do to the federal government in particular. Lost my place. So there's many refugees who face significant barriers to resettlement in Australia through ongoing impacts of trauma. Language barriers, finding work can obviously be difficult, and often previous qualifications are not recognised or supported. So we support people through a range of programs, things like our settlement program, a number of our education, training and employment programs, things like the Flemington Homework Club that's been going for many years, and we'll hear a bit more about that one in a moment. And also a number of other programs that we run that do support refugees and people seeking asylum, even though they might not be focused specifically on that as their goal. There might be a range of programs that just happen to support people going through that work. We also, as I mentioned, do run the Catholic Alliance for People Seeking Asylum, which helps us do advocacy in this space and to try and encourage a much more humane response to people seeking asylum in Australia. We also stand in solidarity with refugees and people seeking asylum through our policy work. And just as a bit of an example of that, we have made submissions recently to the Multicultural Framework Review, and we made a submission to the federal government ahead of this year's budget, and we always try and represent some of the key issues in those documents. Some of the things that we advocate for here at Jesuit Social Services include ending offshore detention permanently. For those who are waiting on permanent protection, we want them to be living in the community rather than onshore detention. We want to increase the humanitarian intake beyond the current 20,000 per year. We want to ensure that people on temporary visas are adequately supported to be able to access the support they need, Medicare, but also to have work rights or access to a safety net if they're unable to work. And I think the final point to make on that is that we are working to see people who have been in Australia for some more than 10 years to be granted permanent protection and the right to live here. The important thing about all of those programs and all of that activity, of course, is the people at the heart of them. And it's important to remember, of course, and to understand the stories of the people at the heart of all of that, all of those words. And so I'm really excited today that we do have, I think, possibly the best dressed man in the room, Isaiah, with us today, who's going to share with us a little bit of his story, a little bit of his journey. Isaiah is a former refugee from the Republic of Sierra Leone who arrived in Australia in November 2006 after fleeing civil war. Isaiah spent 14 years in many refugee camps, but today is a qualified social worker and lives with his wife and 5 children. And after Isaiah comes up and speaks to us and tells us a bit about his story, we also have another very special guest, Sister Bridget Arthur, who will come up on stage and join Isaiah and Julie Edwards in a bit of a conversation to reflect on some of the things that we've heard, some of the key issues of the day, and so on. Sister Bridget is a founding member of the Brigidine Asylum Seeker Project, an organisation that provides practical support to asylum seekers, including emergency funds, food and housing. Sister Bridget is also a fierce advocate for loving, humane and just treatment of refugees and people seeking asylum. So I will now invite Isaiah up on stage to tell us a bit about your story. Please give Isaiah a round of applause.
Good afternoon. Oh, we are not yet afternoon. Isaiah have eaten so much, he's forgotten the time. Now, I'm here this day because somebody built this platform for me to be here. But before I could start talking to all of us, I want to acknowledge our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of this beautiful nation, Australia. Thanks to the Jesuit Social Services and the Just Speakers program to put a shine on people like me. Before I could go into presenting my life, I would like us to please sit calmly and watch a 6-minute documentary that was put together by the ABC 730 report about my life journey so far. Thank you.
He survived a bitter civil war that killed thousands and 14 years in a refugee camp, only to be the victim of racist attacks in Tasmania. You might assume African refugee Isaiah Lahai would be bitter and broken, but as Anna Fromberg found out, you couldn't be more wrong. The father of 4 has made it his personal mission to spread hope amongst Tasmania's refugee community and educate others about social inclusion.
Life as a refugee is a nightmare. Being a refugee actually is like being a human being without a nationality, being a human being without identity, being a human being without a future or hope. My name is Isaiah Lahai, and this is my family. We are former refugees from Sierra Leone, and this is our story.
Isaiah Lahai was 14 when civil war broke out in the West African country of Sierra Leone. He was one of millions of people left homeless by the bitter conflict that raged for more than a decade.
On the 23rd of March 1991, I left my home country and went into exile as a refugee for 14 horrible years.
Mr. Lahai and his family walked for 3 days across Sierra Leone to the border and a refugee camp in the neighbouring country of Guinea. His teenage years were spent moving from one camp to another.
We changed 5 different refugee camps. That alone was difficult.
It was at one of the refugee camps that Isaiah Lahai met his wife and had his first 3 children. One died at age 2 due to a lack of medical treatment.
She had malaria, 3 days, no proper treatment. She passed away just like that.
7 years on, life is very different for the Lahai family. In 2006, they moved into the Hobart suburb of Kingston after being granted asylum in Australia.
When we reached in Sydney, I saw the airport is so big, the city is so big. I told my wife, we have reached to the second heaven.
Although grateful for the opportunity of a new life, Mr. Lahai says it hasn't been easy. The family has had to learn English, adjust to cultural differences and the climate. With no proper education, Mr. Lahai also struggled to get a job and says taxi driving was his only option.
I have had, I could say, a lot of positive and negative experiences being a taxi driver to start with. I have been twice racially abused.
A Hobart man's been jailed for 9 months for several racist attacks. His teenage brother was also involved but has been released from custody.
In 2009, I was bashed simply because of the color of my skin and being a taxi driver.
2 brothers from Claremont were charged with assault after calling Mr. Lahai a black dog animal and punching him repeatedly. One was sentenced to 9 months jail. The other received a suspended prison sentence.
That never stopped me from hoping for a better tomorrow. That never stopped me from believing that Tasmania can be an example for Australia to follow in diversity and multiculturalism.
It was that way of thinking that saw Mr. Lahai selected as a People of Australia ambassador last year. It's a voluntary role he takes very seriously.
Thank you, Donna, and I want to thank the University of Tasmania.
Mr. Lahai visits schools and community groups to educate people about social inclusion and racism.
The only thing that can stop racism, I believe, is education. We need to educate the community.
What sort of reception do you receive when you visit schools?
My first ever visit to schools was in Bridgewater. When I arrived at the school kids have never set eyes on a black person in their school. So these children were very nervous to the extent they started, who is this black man coming to our school? Who brought him here? And I said, oh, good, this is a motivation. I'm going to really touch the lives of these children.
Yesterday, Mr. Lahai spoke to more than 300 students at Kingston High. It was a message of tolerance and inclusion that he was spreading as part of Refugee Week.
I would really encourage us to embrace and welcome the people that comes into our society. They are human beings like us.
Isaiah Lahai is passionate about giving back to the country that gave him refuge and hopes to soon gain paid employment helping other refugees. He's in his final year of a social work degree at the University of Tasmania.
I want to call this place home, and I believe if I could call this place home, it is my responsibility to contribute towards the development, the social inclusion, the multiculturalism, the diversity of this beautiful state of Tasmania. Children suffer without the father. Oh yeah. That's good. Well, I hope I've not bored all of you with, without a father, children suffer. However, Whenever I'm in a room with some personalities, I feel nervous, especially sharing a stage with someone I hold dearly to my heart, Sister Bridget. This is the second time I'm sharing stage with her. Whenever I see her in the room, I am on my toes. I honor you, sister. She is a beautiful soul that is doing so much for humanity, and I want us to give her a very big hand of applause, please. And I want to thank the Jesuit Social Services, especially the Just Speakers program, Daniel and the crew. And I believe we have some speakers in the room. Can you guys please stand up so that we can acknowledge you? You're doing a great job, guys. Keep it up. Daniel, thank you. Without your commitment, and my brother from another mother, Pauline, can you please stand up? These are the people keeping us on track. You know, it's not an easy thing for you to come to a new country, you know nobody, coming from the bush for 14 years, living as a refugee, and just to be known by few that will give you a platform like this to share your story is an incredible thing. Julie, thank you so much for the work you are doing with the Jesuit to put us on the map. And I hope after today, the speakers program will go all over Australia, because evil can only prevail when good people stop talking. You've heard all about me, but I want to go through very briefly, because I have a limited time, as big guns are waiting to come on stage, so I have to be careful. I want to share a little bit about my life, because many people be thinking, how could that young boy be 14 in 1991 and he is this old today? Actually, it is true. It's not a fiction. This is me. And I love this photo because it reminds me of the days of being a refugee. And I want to briefly go through some stuff. In Africa, many times in Australia, people will ask me, is Africa a big country? Are there cars? Do they have good houses? Well, unfortunately, I turn around and I say, you know what? Africa is not a country, but a continent with 54 countries. We have over 1,000 languages and over 1 billion people. And English is my fourth language. I'm still learning how to speak English. So Africa is not a country. We should carry that out there for people to know. Now, I came from a very tiny part of Africa called Sierra Leone on the west coast of Africa, with a population around 8 million precise. Sierra Leone was blessed with mineral resources, but due to corruption, poor leadership, in 1991, a civil war broke out of that nation that killed thousands of people. A lot of inhumane stuff took place that I can't talk much about. But in 1991, I fled due to the campaign they brought, hoping that they are going to bring about change. But the change they brought was nothing but carnage. On the 23rd of March, on a beautiful Friday morning around 2:30 p.m., I was roaming about our community like any 14-year-old would. By the time I came back home, mom and dad, siblings, everyone gone. The doors are locked. There was nothing for me to do. At that tender age, I was left to make an informed decision that would change my life. I either stay and die or run and survive. I choose the latter. What happened? This is what refugees are like. When they say refugee, they have no destination. They don't even know when they are going. They don't know how they are going. When they say asylum seekers, they are not coming to take away your jobs or coming because they lack good cars in their countries of origin. They are coming because they are running away from things beyond their control. Persecution, torture, Many of us, from 1991 to today, have never been back to Sierra Leone. And that's what a refugee life is. And I pray that none of us here will ever be a refugee again, because it's not a good life to live. Now, these are the guys that brought the war in Sierra Leone. The guy you see here, this one is called Charles Taylor. He actually was the one that started the war in Liberia, and then the other guy called Fode Sanko, he is now dead. He waged war in Sierra Leone. And the campaign they brought was not to bring survivor, but to campaign and kill, amputate little kids. I'm sorry for some of us in the room. You may see some images that may be confronting, but I want to share them with you because they are not fictions, but reality of what happened in my country. This is the end result of what took place in Sierra Leone. They will ask you, do you need a long sleeve or a short sleeve? They want to infuse fear into you so that when you see them moving around with the guns, you don't confront them. And this is the end result of their aim, to bring about change. The change they brought was to amputate, chop off arms, and open the wombs of pregnant women just to know the type of sex that is in the womb. That's how horrific it was. So when we have this platform to share our journey, I believe if we want Australia to have a just and equitable society, the speakers program, the Just Speakers program, should have a much bigger platform to go all over Australia. Because one thing I know about Australia, when you share your story with people, they walk with you in your shoe. And Julie, I will plead, speakers programs should go all over Australia. Because if we are to have a just society where everyone makes a difference, we need a much bigger platform to carry on these tasks. Now, who is a refugee and who is a migrant? As I said earlier, refugees are people who don't have destination. They don't know when they are going. Unlike migrants, they will just say, I want to go to New York because Australia is very cold now. I want to go and have a change of climate. And I know the time I'm going, Jetstar is a little bit expensive. No, I can't go Qantas. I want to take Virgin Airline. And I know the time I'm going to the airport. I know my luggage. I know the destination. Refugees, asylum seekers do not have that luxury. According to the United Nations, refugees are people who are running away for the fear of what? Persecution, religious reason. And we know today in the world we live, millions of people are being displaced, thousands being killed for reasons of nothing they know about. We have the power to change it. And the change has to start with all of us in this room. Each of us has the voice, the power to make a change in our society. Now, we have barriers. Earlier, I was seated at the back and Julie was up here. She was talking about the barriers that we face, especially for refugees and migrants. People like me, we have language barrier. We have social isolation. I'm afraid maybe if I talk to someone I don't know, they may not listen to me. We have economic barriers in terms of employment, housing. We need help. But that help cannot be achieved if someone do not come to help us. There are thousands of my type living in communities. They know nobody. Where I came from, we live in a collectivist social atmosphere where your problem is my problem and my problem is your problem. But here we are, individualism. Everybody have to care for themselves. My plea this day is we should be a voice to the voiceless. As I open up, evil can only prevail when good people stop talking. My journey in Australia, as you watch in the documentary, in 2009, I was living a life in Tasmania. I was a voice to all the refugees in Tasmania. And also, I have a responsibility to care for my family. Unfortunately, one morning, 1:20 a.m., I was driving and I saw 3 young boys. They were intoxicated. They had bottles of beers. They stood in the middle of the road. I could not escape them. They said, take us down to Salamanca. I opened the car, they got in. By the time I could start conversation, the one seated next to me punched me 3 times. And then they accused me that we have come to take away their jobs. They brought us here. The government is giving us houses, big TVs, and doing all sorts of things. By the time I could try to encourage him, started using all abusive words on me, and then they poured all the beer they had in the vehicle. I almost lost control. Fortunately, I stopped, they got out, and that was it. I was taken to hospital. I wanted the issue to die there because I knew my status in Tasmania. I never wanted anyone to hear. Unfortunately, this was what happened. I want us all to reflect on the phrase, "It's as bad as Africa." What do you think? That's the biggest paper in Tasmania called the Mercury paper. Because of my status and the power I had to talk to people in Tassie, when they heard about my abuse, they took it up. Without my consent, the front page is as bad as Africa. I was coming from university and someone called me, "Isaiah, have you seen the paper?" I said, "What happened?" "Go get the paper." I said, "Why? Tell me small." Say, "It's as bad as Africa." I was shocked. When I went to a news agent to get one paper, there was none. Someone got this one and gave it to me. I went to the Mercury. I said, "Why? Why will you do this? I'm from a very tiny part of Africa. I don't even know 10% of Africa. Why will you go to this limit to just make money?" He said, "Unfortunately, we know who you are, and we wanted to send the story out." That was it. I tried for them to do retraction. Nothing. And then the next battle was fighting to save those that bullied me. Because if there's anything I know, hate can never achieve hate. You cannot pay back evil for evil. As a Christian, the Bible teaches me to love, forgive, hope, and believe that God is able to fight for you. Vengeance is not mine, but the Lord. I started advocating for this young man not to go to prison. Fortunately, one was not sent to prison. But the one that went to prison, after he came out, it took him 7 years. He wrote me, he said, "Mr. Lahai, it is unfortunate that I was not to myself when I abused you. But each time I try to write, I am nervous and I'm ashamed of myself because I was not supposed to do what I did to you. I never knew you have a good soul to advocate for me, to speak on my behalf, even when I have wronged you. I said I forgave you the very day you bullied me. Because what I know, forgiveness is not for the perpetrator. Forgiveness is for you, the victim. Because if you don't forgive people who hurt you, you are imprisoning your own very self, your conscience. Any day, anytime you see them, you are very much anxious and angry for vengeance. So when you forgive people, you free yourself from the agony of vengeance. So forgiveness is a pillar that all of us should hold dearly. Now, when I went to the Mercury to do retraction, they could not. They just said, "Hope in sanctuary." What do people think about that? That's the power of the media. You cannot beat them. They always have an edge against you. But that did not stop me from doing what I believe we should do to change Australia. I went on to do a whole lot of things. I became a lobby, an activist. I even intensified my advocacy to make sure that we have a change in Tasmania. And to the glory of God, before I left Tasmania, there was a shift. And I believe that shift is going to continue because from little things, big things grow. All of us here, regardless of your background, we all have a duty of care to this beautiful nation. We can make Australia great. We can make Australia a beautiful nation where everyone feels welcome. That's why I am so much thankful to the Jesuit Social Services because of the courage and the mindset, the vision of this organization is to make sure there is a society where everyone is equal. And I thank you again for this opportunity. Now, because of time, I just want to go truly and leave the stage for the big guns to come. I want to tell you people, good can only prevail when good people continue to talk. And evil can only prevail when good people stop talking. Never see what is wrong and you keep quiet. In your organization, in your community, even in your families, speak up. Your speaking may change someone's life for good. Now, people may say, but who are these refugees? What good have they got to bring in our society? Who are the asylum seekers? We all know from statistics, people that came from other nations, some refugees, some migrants, we know the investment they have done in Australia. We know the impact of their contribution that Australia is benefiting from. All we ask, give us the opportunity to step forward and see what we can do. How can we be inspired by my story? Do little things. Continue to help people. Continue to believe that we can change Australia. And if you don't believe, this is Isaiah's story. Forgiveness is the platform. Love, hope. Pope Francis said, forgiveness and mercy is the heart of your life. We cannot demand God's forgiveness if we are not ready to forgive others. So when you want God to forgive you, forgive others. Nelson Mandela said, when a deep injury is done to us, we can never heal if we do not forgive, because forgiveness is the medicine to healing. Now, hope, love, peace can be achieved if we work together. And Isaiah has done some duty of care to this nation. The short time I've been here, I've been able to go through a university degree, which nobody in my generation has ever been able to achieve. But I'm proud of it because I lay a benchmark for my children. And I've been given few awards, nationally and state-wise, but I believe there is more to be done. And if that's not enough, I have shared stage with 3 prime ministers and governor generals of Australia, and also I look forward to the Jesuit social services giving us the grace and the platform to continue to share our stories, not only in Victoria, but let's have this opportunity to go beyond Victoria, even nationally, to go as far as Canberra. Let them have a platform for refugees and asylum seekers to share their stories. That's the only way we can educate the Australian society of who we are, what is bringing us here. Finally, I want to encourage you, let us love humanity. There is too much going on in the world. Fighting, as we speak, in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Sudan, all over the world. We have to do something, and we should, and we must. My call to you this day, when you leave from here, will you take a step to do what is right to humanity? There are millions of innocent kids being killed every day. Millions of innocent women, men being killed. What will you do in your organization? What will you do in your community to make a change? I want to thank the Jesuit Social Services for the incredible work they are doing to keep the voices of refugees and asylum seekers moving. I believe that's the only way we can make a difference. This is my family currently in Australia, and this is only possible because of the love, the care, and the welcoming atmosphere being given by the Australian community. I want to thank you all, and if you ever want to contact me, you please go through Danielle. She is the star. Thank you, and God bless you.
I think we just heard from the big gun, don't you? Isaiah, please come, and Sister Bridget too. And I won't do any more introductions. Andrew's done that very well. Yeah, I think I'll just get on with it. We're going to have a conversation just for about maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then there's some questions for you to discuss at your table. So I'll go over here. Hi, assuming this is on. Yes, great. Thanks so much, Isaiah. You made that really real for us, I think. And I know what you're saying about the power of story and the imagery and everything. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I really just want to acknowledge you and your journey and what you've done. And I'd like to inquire a little bit more in a moment about how you have, dug into that hope and allowed that. I think the quotes were beautiful about not succumbing to bitterness, and so thank you so much. But Bridget, I'm going to begin with you, and I think you are well known to us as an organisation, I know, and to many people in our community. So I'm sure we don't need to revisit that, I suppose. But maybe I could just get you to respond first of all to what you saw in Isaiah. I know you've met each other before, but to Isaiah's presentation, what stands out for you? What are some of the things you'd like to note or comment on?
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I feel a bit overwhelmed by Isaiah. I can't compete with that. But I think one of the things that I guess struck us all was how unfair life is and how lucky some of us are. How unfair it can be to some people who happen to be born in one part of the world, who just happen, and how lucky the rest of us are because we're born somewhere else. It's got nothing to do with how good we are, how smart we are, how anything. And yet one of the things that Isaiah, I think, kept saying was every human being is important. Every human being is as important as any other human being. Every human being is as precious as every other human being. And somehow or other, we need to be working towards a world where, at least bit by bit, it's going to need many revolutions, but at least bit by bit, we are shaping things so that there's not this huge inequity. And we don't seem to be going there. I think I read the other day there's 46, I might be making that up, places where there's warfare at the moment. Real war. People just killing each other. We watch with horror what's happening in Gaza and other places. But it's not only happening to those places that happen to get on the news. It's happening, in many, many other places that seem to be just forgotten. So Isaiah, I think, as soon as we see someone who's actually been through that situation, it's a bit different to seeing it on TV, isn't it? So that's, I think, what stood out for me, Julie.
Thanks, Bridget, which sort of points to the importance of what you were saying of giving voice to that experience, etc. Bridget, just another question for you, I suppose. When you said we don't seem to be getting there, and I was thinking about this issue particularly on this day, but about refugees and people seeking asylum. And I know that's part of why we started the Catholic Alliance for People Seeking Asylum, because we weren't able individually or even as little entities to get any cut through. And I'm not saying we're doing very well now, but I wanted to ask you a bit about that, because my sense is that maybe it's things like COVID and then the cost of living, etc., but it seems to have fallen off, the concern seems to have fallen off the agenda again. So it comes and goes, and when it does come, it seems to be more about, being worked for political gain, as you were saying, Isaiah, make sure, that why is there a housing crisis? Oh, it's because there's so many people coming, or all of that. So, and we know in the youth justice system, it's often new arrivals, children of refugees, etc., who get blamed. So What do you think is behind this, our not being able to maintain a focus on it, and it's so readily forgetting about it?
Yeah, in one way, a lot of us who work in the advocacy area, as well as in practically helping people, in the advocacy area, we kind of hope that things won't get on the front page of the news, because every time it gets on the front page of the news, it seems to stir up some other, either hatred or misinformation, and you think, oh, we're better off if no one's talking about asylum seekers, not so much refugees, but asylum seekers. That's people who come here looking for protection. And then, when it's not on the news for a while, we think everybody's forgotten about it, and so maybe we should be stirring up some interest. So, I must admit, I don't know the answer whether it's better to be in the news or it's not better to be in the news in terms of asylum seekers. But I think, Julie, you're right in saying, things like cost of living and so on, housing, they preoccupy people, kind of rightly so. That's our lives. That's what we're in the middle of. But for those of us who work in this area, but also those of us who live in a lucky country like Australia and think about the identity of this country, then it behoves us, I think, to try at least in part to think about those big issues like migration, like who else in the world should we be helping, like who are we selling arms to so that these wars go on, like, climate, obviously, things that are globally important, maybe not touching me personally at this moment, but we can't afford, if we all think that, then nothing ever happens. So together we've got to think, at least part of the time, of how do we make a better Australia, how do we fulfil our obligations as a global citizen, not just as a citizen, not just as a personal citizen. And I think we begin that with young people. Young people are really, really interested, I find, in what the world's shaping up to be. And we can help them to do that.
Thanks, Bridget. And Isaiah, I'd like to come to you about that question too. We have a system that has many faults and flaws in it in terms of the treatment of people seeking asylum and refugees. I suppose I'm trying to bring it down from that big picture to something we really can do in our own life. Is it about befriending people in our community? What can we do to make a difference, do you think? What can we do besides our organisation and our work, but at a really personal level? Have you got any thoughts?
Well, to start with, I want us to know that Australia is a signatory to the Refugees and Asylum Seekers Convention at the United Nations. And it is not a crime for people to come to the shores of Australia seeking refuge. It's never a crime. Australia has a duty of care to welcome those people that comes, give them security, because they are coming because of lack of security. And when they come, they should not be used as a political football by politicians to gain political status. It shouldn't be. I remember the days of John Howard and people like Tony Abbott, people like Malcolm Turnbull, when they used to talk about people coming, they call them queue jumpers, they call them people that are coming, throwing their children overboard the sea just to come to Australia. Nobody in their right mind, living at peace in their country of origin, will just decide to say, let me go. I never knew there was a country or a continent called Australia. My father was not a millionaire, but I was content with everything that we had. I never knew I would come to a place like this, and I never chose to come here. It was due to war. And Australia has a part to play. We sponsor some of the carnage that goes on around the world. And when these people are displaced, when they come seeking refuge, we have a duty of care to welcome them. And talking about refugees, coming back to your question, Julie, we don't just need to talk about it during Refugee Week. It shouldn't be. This should be something that is spoken on dinner tables, changing minds, changing lives. There are parents out there, there are people in our community who don't believe refugees, asylum seekers are things that really happens. They just feel it's a fiction or it's just a scam to get Australia open up. But it's the reality. We look at Gaza today. Thousands of kids are killed. I was watching news, and a 12-year-old was asking his mother, "Mom, am I going to get back my limb?" That shocked me. They chopped off his hand, and he's asking if he will get it back. It is terrible. We should welcome people. And my encouragement to the Jesuit should be, let us work on improving the opportunities for people to share their stories. It should not just be during Refugee Week, but let's have a program wherein people go from, like I've been to over 200 schools and community organizations. Let us embrace this opportunity. The more we speak, the better people will hear us, and the better they will understand. I know for one, if you share your story with Australians, they walk with you in your shoe.
Thank you. And that really resonates with what Bridget was saying. It's very different from seeing it on television or on social media, but when it's real. Do you mind if I just jump to, how did you end up at Jesuit Social Services?
Well, that was a good one. I remember, I think
I think, will I ask this? But no.
I think we're celebrating 10 years, right? Woo-hoo. Come on, give us a big hand. We are celebrating. So, you know, coming from Tasmania, I was coming from a small pond into an ocean. And when I came, I still had the desire to continue speaking. And luckily, the former coordinator of the program, Daniel, could you please remember the name of the first coordinator I worked with? Yes.
Johanna, you remember Johanna.
Johanna.
And Johanna also led CAPSA for a while too.
Yes.
Yep.
So when I got an email, we've seen you. We know you are here. Don't hide. Come. We need your voice. I said, I'm new in Victoria, and Victoria is so big. I could run the whole of Tasmania in 1 hour, but here, I can't do that. They said, no, we need you. And since then, I'm grateful for the opportunities, even though it's not as frequent as I used to have in Tasmania. But I believe today will be a day that we can expand, because my view about giving a voice for refugees and asylum seekers should be relatable at federal level. I remember when I used to go to Canberra when I was a People of Australia ambassador. I will urge them. There was a day when I met with the former Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. I told him, please, Honorable, let us give voice to the refugees. It will reduce your workload to defend your policies. Just give us that platform. And I'm begging today, let us enlarge this platform. There are incredible speakers out there that are even better than me, but we need to give them the platform.
Thanks. Thank you, Isaiah. Bridget, I've heard you say not so long ago, maybe it was in a private conversation, that you think things are worse than ever for people seeking asylum, about their situation. Can you just tease that out for people to understand what it's actually like now, what people are facing? Because I think people have thought, oh, new government, things are getting a bit better. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Thanks, Julie. There are two ends of the spectrum in terms of how asylum seekers, that's people who come here seeking protection, how they're faring. Those who come in right now, you know, there are people arriving all the time on tourist visas or student or business visas, mainly tourist visas, and then seeking asylum when they get here. And even though they come in with little English, no housing, not too sure what's going to happen next, in one way, we keep saying at our place, it's a piece of cake trying to help them, because they're still hopeful. They still think that, Australia's going to be a great place and very fair and, things are going to work. I talked to one young person today who'd only been here for 3 weeks. And it was just, amazing talking to him. We've got a whole group of people from Colombia just arrived, and we've been working closely with them. And they're amazing. They're learning English so fast. They haven't got any help other than places like ourselves and others who are helping them bit by bit in this first stage. But the ones who have been here for 10 or 12 years, who came by boat predominantly, people are only arriving by plane now, almost 100%. Those who came by boat all that time ago, they've spent a lot of time, most of them in detention, some of them offshore. They've gone through the whole process. Some are right at the end of the road. They've got no visa, they've got no money, they've got no work rights, they've got no Medicare. They literally exist with begging or trying to get a bit of cash in hand work. Many of them are sick, mentally and physically. And those people, that group of people, are in a worse situation than any I've ever seen. Remember those who were in the Park Hotel and they were released from there? They have only 6-month visas at a time, and some of them are getting on okay, but some of them will never be okay. They're kind of broken people. And they join some of those that I've already mentioned about they've got nothing. And then there are others who might still have a visa, but they're waiting on the goodwill of the federal court, and probably will fail too. So there's a group of maybe 5,000 people who are in that sort of situation here in Australia. It's not a huge number, not by the standards of could we help them? Of course we could. 5,000 is not going to break the Australian budget. We could help them, but there's no will to help them, and any kind of attempt is falling on deaf ears. We thought the Labor Party would bring in a lot of changes. They have done some things, and they also, even at this stage, are getting some people through the system. But it's extraordinarily slow, and there's this residue of people for whom there seems to be no end in sight. Has that answered?
Yes, very, very much. And I'm interested to hear you mention that number, because it is actually a very manageable number of people for us to do something different about, isn't it? Really is. It's not millions of people the way that it could be portrayed. So just finally and briefly, Bridget, when you speak with decision makers, as I know you have been for years, are you sensing any shift in attitude? Are you feeling a bit of hope about what might be able to happen?
I think the answer is no. When most people I talk to, even though publicly you sort of think, oh, they seem to be pretty hard, but when you talk to them personally, and I'm not saying I talk to thousands, I don't, but I talk to a number, and they almost all say, yeah, it's pretty bad. Then they say, they sort of ask you a few questions and you think, you don't know much about this, do you? Even people who are quite close to the decision makers. So some of it is a lack of understanding and knowledge, but some of it is too, at a personal level, they would do something, but at a government level, they just seem hamstrung by the politics of particularly the two major party, kind of if we give an inch, then the other lot will get at us. Somehow or other we've got to change that mindset. I think unless it's bipartisan, it's not going to happen. And that worries me.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Isaiah. We've just got maybe 5 minutes at your tables. We've got a few questions. You can discuss these or choose one. But I suppose importantly, it's really again about at the personal level. Has anything touched you in, for example, from Isaiah's presentation, or anything surprised you? Is there something you weren't aware about? I always learn more about this. I'm not across this issue to the extent that I probably should be, and I wasn't aware of that 5,000 number that you've talked about. I thought it was larger myself. So
Probably up to 10,000 who are still in the pipeline.
Yes.
But about 5,000 who are stuck.
Yes.
With nowhere to go.
yes, yes.
And if you look at it, the actual number of people that comes here illegally, they are in their tens of thousands.
Yeah.
And nobody talk about them.
Yeah.
Why should refugees and asylum seekers be a point of focus?
Yes.
Why? It shouldn't be when we have a duty to them. It shouldn't be. But this is who we are today.
So what we'll do is just 5 minutes at your table. It might be, have I learnt something new, or what struck me, what's sitting with me now? Is there something that I think I could do about this? Or something I'm going to take away from this session? So just, again, I'd encourage you just to be silent for 30 seconds, just to, before you jump into talking and conversation, notice what is going on in you. How are you feeling? How have you been touched by what we've talked about? So just let's remain silent just for a moment. Okay, so at your tables just for 5 minutes, and then I'll call you back. So enjoy your conversation. everyone. Hi, everyone. I know that was a very short time to discuss such important matters. So let's just come back to the large group together just for a moment. Of course, what we're hoping by having that conversation at your tables and by having the opportunity to listen to our guests, to Isaiah and Bridget, is that in fact it doesn't stop now as we go off to lunch, but that you're encouraged and stimulated to keep pondering this, to keep thinking about what can be done at the political level, at an organisational level, and just in the quiet ordinariness of our own lives, what we can do. So that's an ongoing conversation. But before we break for lunch, which we will be coming back at 2:30, so we've got from 1:30 to 2:30 for lunch, on behalf of you all, I want to thank Isaiah so much again for a wonderful presentation that has really touched our hearts. Let's do that. And also for Sister Bridget, who is such a faithful advocate in your quiet, stoic way. And you've been doing this for so long, and you have never let that slip. Whereas I know that we as a people and as a nation do. So on behalf of us all, I want to thank you too, Bridget, and for supporting our efforts here today. Thanks, Bridget.